Dr. Maya Ellison power walked through the fluorescent-lit corridor of St. Augustine Medical Center, her teal scrub top still damp with sweat from a 12-hour brain surgery that had pushed her to the edge of exhaustion. The child she had just operated on was alive, stable, and clinging to a future that had been slipping away when she first opened his skull. She had been halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee when the emergency call came in. Severe head trauma, ambulance inbound, neurosurgeon needed on arrival, stat. Now, as she neared the glass doors that led to the ambulance bay, she could already hear shouting outside. Not the usual controlled chaos of a trauma arrival. This was personal, angry, ugly. Through the sliding doors, Maya saw a heavy-set white paramedic pacing near the back of an ambulance. His face flushed, radio clutched in his fist like a weapon. His name tag read, B. Walker. He jabbed a finger towards someone just out of frame, his lip curling in disgust. "Get that fat whale out of my way," he snarled into the radio. "I don't care if she works here. People like her are what's wrong with healthcare. Lazy, taking up space, waddling around like they own the place. She probably can't even fit through the doors properly." Maya stopped dead, the words hitting her with the cold clarity of a slap. She didn't have to see who he was talking about. There was no one else standing between the ambulance and the emergency entrance. He meant her, and he wasn't whispering. He wanted everyone to hear. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, take a breath with me. If you believe that the people who dedicate their lives to saving others deserve respect, not mockery, then you're in the right place. If you think skill, compassion, and sacrifice matter more than skin color or body size, stay with this story. And if you stand for justice over judgment and compassion over cruelty, consider subscribing and joining a community that refuses to look away when prejudice walks into the room. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, releasing a blast of humid afternoon air from the ambulance bay. Maya stepped outside, shoulders squared, heart steady. To anyone watching, she looked calm, just another surgeon responding to a trauma call. Inside, her pulse was a drum. Ben Walker didn't even notice her at first. He kept pacing, radio to his mouth, his bulk casting jagged shadows over the concrete. "Dispatch, we've got a situation here," he barked. "Some obese woman is blocking our path to the emergency entrance. She's just standing there like she owns the place. These people have zero respect for emergency services. We've got a critical patient, and this—" He flung a hand in her direction without even turning to really look at her. "This whale thinks she can just waddle around wherever she wants." Maya's jaw clenched, but her expression didn't change. 20 years as a black woman in medicine had trained her to do this, to hold the line between fury and focus, to swallow humiliation so she could get to the patient before the damage became permanent. She'd heard worse, sometimes from patients, sometimes from colleagues. Rarely this loud, never this brazen. Ben turned to his partner, a younger Latino paramedic shifting anxiously from foot to foot. His badge read L. Cruz. "You know what the problem is, Leo," Ben said loud enough for everyone in a 10-meter radius to hear. "They hire these quota fillers and the whole system goes to hell. Look at her. Probably never missed a meal in her life. Definitely never saved one either." Dull Leo Cruz glanced up, eyes flicking to Maya with an apology he didn't dare speak aloud. "Ben, maybe we should just focus on getting our patient inside," he said quietly. "The call said they needed a neurosurgeon." "A neurosurgeon?" Ben barked out a harsh laugh. "Right. Like they'd let someone like that near a brain. She probably can't even spell neurosurgeon, let alone be one." Maya took a slow breath, feeling the familiar burn of injustice rise in her chest, and then she stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low but firm. "I'm Dr. Ellison. I'm the attending neurosurgeon on call. I understand you have a patient who needs immediate attention." Ben finally turned to really look at her. For a split second, his eyes widened in surprise. Caught. Then his face hardened, prejudice slamming down like a steel door. "Oh, that's cute," he said. "Now she's pretending to be a doctor. What's next? You gonna tell me you're the chief of surgery?" Maya didn't flinch. "I'm the attending neurosurgeon," she repeated evenly. "Your dispatch reported a head trauma, possible intracranial bleed. Where is your patient, Mr. Walker?" He stepped directly into her path, his bulk blocking the ambulance doors. "Lady, I don't know what con you're running," he said, voice rising, "but I'm not letting some impostor touch my patient. I've been a medic for 8 years. I know what doctors look like, and they do not look like you." Leo's ears turned red. "Ben, not now, Leo," Ben snapped. "Go get me a real neurosurgeon, someone who doesn't look like she ate the last one." The words sliced through the humid air. A few nurses near the entrance stopped what they were doing and turned. A respiratory therapist froze halfway down the ramp. Eyes shifted from Ben to Maya, then to the closed ambulance doors, behind which a man's brain might be swelling with each passing second. Maya's hands that had held clamps on arteries thinner than a strand of hair, hands that had guided tiny instruments through delicate brain tissue over 3,000 times, remained utterly steady at her sides. "Mr. Walker," she said quietly, "there is a patient in your ambulance who may be losing brain cells every minute we stand here. Whatever you think of my body, my race, or my worth, none of it matters as much as his life. Now step aside and let me do my job." "Oh, I'll let a real doctor do his job," Ben shot back. "You? You're probably food services or janitorial. Maybe someone lets you play dress-up in scrubs. But I am not handing over my patient to a diversity hire who can't control her own eating habits." The crowd around them thickened. Orderlies, nurses, an X-ray tech still in a lead apron. Leo shifted, clearly wishing the concrete would open and swallow him whole. "Where's your ID?" Ben demanded, thrusting out a hand. "If you're really a doctor, show me your badge. Show me your license, because I guarantee you don't have either." Maya slipped her hospital badge from her pocket and placed it in his palm. Dr. Maya Ellison, attending neurosurgeon, St. Augustine Medical Center. Ben squinted at it, jaw working. "This has got to be fake," he muttered. "No way. You probably stole it from the real doctor. These badges are easy to copy. I've seen it. Addicts, homeless people, all kinds of lowlifes trying to sneak in." "Ben, that's enough," Leo said sharply. "You can see the hologram, the security strip, the watermark. That badge is real, and she clearly knows what she's talking about." "Oh, I get it," Ben cut in, turning his contempt on his partner now. "You're buying this because you're scared of being called racist. Newsflash. This isn't about race. It's about standards. Real doctors don't waddle around, out of breath, looking like they live in the cafeteria." For the first time, a tremor flickered in Maya's fingers, but her voice stayed rock solid. "In the time we've argued," she said, "your patient's brain could be swelling into the confines of his skull. Blood clots could be forming. Every minute we waste, thousands of neurons die. Are you truly willing to trade that man's future for your comfort with what a real doctor looks like?" Before Ben could answer, the glass doors behind them flew open. "What the hell is going on out here?" Dr. Marcus Hale, chief of emergency medicine, strode into the bay, white coat flaring behind him. Tall, black, mid-50s, with silver at his temples and the kind of presence that could mute a room without raising his voice. "Dr. Hale," Maya said, relief tempered by urgency. "Head trauma in the rig. They called for neurosurgery. I'm trying to get to the patient." Ben seized the opportunity. "Finally," he huffed. "Doctor, security needs to escort this woman away. She's impersonating a surgeon and trying to touch my patient. I need a real neurosurgeon, not—" He gestured crudely at Maya. "This." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Dr. Hale looked from Ben to Maya, then to the badge still clutched in Ben's fist. "This woman," he said slowly, "is Dr. Maya Ellison, one of the finest neurosurgeons in this state. She has saved more lives in our operating rooms than most physicians see in an entire career. And right now, you are the only thing standing between her and a patient who needs her." "That's impossible," Ben said, voice cracking. "Look at her. Does she look like a brain surgeon to you?" Dr. Hale's eyes hardened. "I am looking at her. I see the surgeon who saved my sister's life after a ruptured aneurysm. I see a woman who has dedicated her entire adult life to keeping people like your patient alive. What I don't see is a good reason why we're still wasting time in this parking lot." A murmur rippled through the gathered staff. Leo exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. Ben shook his head, clinging to his narrative like a life raft. "I know doctors," he insisted. "I've worked with them for 8 years. They're disciplined. They're fit. They look the part. This woman, he flung the badge toward Maya. It swung from its lanyard and hit her chest. Doesn't look like she's ever seen a gym, let alone an OR. Mr. Walker, a new voice joined the fray, calm, cool, and edged with steel. Nurse Yvonne Clark, head of nursing for the emergency department, stepped forward. Mid-50s, salt and pepper curls pulled back, dark eyes that had seen more trauma than most people could bear. I just came from OR2, she said. Dr. Ellison spent 12 hours reconstructing a little boy's brain so he could grow up and have a life. She hasn't even sat down yet. And now you're delaying another patient's care because you don't like how she looks in scrubs? This isn't about how she looks, Ben protested. It's about safety. Surgeons should look like professionals. They should inspire confidence, not be black, not be plus size, not be women. Dr. Hale cut in bluntly. Is that what you're trying not to say? A flush crept slowly up Ben's neck. Don't twist my words, he snapped. I'm not racist. I just have standards. Your standards, Nurse Clark said, are going to kill someone if you don't get out of the way. Leo couldn't hold it in any longer. Ben, enough. The call asked for the best neurosurgeon on duty. That's her. You know what I heard when she talked about the injury? His voice shook slightly. She knew exactly what was going on in the patient's skull before she even saw him. Maya looked between them, feeling every second slip away like sand. Mr. Walker, she said, this is your last warning. Either you move or I will step around you, and Dr. Hale will deal with the fallout later. But I am not letting a man die in the back of your truck because you don't think a black woman with a soft body can hold a scalpel. The words hung there, quiet, measured, more devastating than any shout. For the first time, something like doubt flickered in Ben's eyes. He glanced back at the ambulance. The siren lights still pulsed weakly, painting the bay in rotating bands of red and white. Inside, a 30-something man lay strapped to a stretcher, unconscious, blood matting his hair, pupils slowly losing the fight to stay symmetrical. Fine, Ben muttered at last, stepping half a pace to the side. But when something goes wrong in there, remember I tried to warn you. Maya didn't waste another breath on him. Leo, with me, she said, already moving. Tell me everything from the top. Time of incident, mechanism of injury, GCS score in the field. I want every detail. See. Leo fell into step beside her, rattling off clinical data as the rear doors swung open. Dr. Hale grabbed the gurney, helping to lower it. Nurse Clark called for the trauma team, her voice crisp and efficient now that the real work had begun. As they rushed the patient toward the sliding doors, the cluster of staff began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others throwing Ben looks of open disgust. He stood rooted to the spot, anger and humiliation wrestling in his chest. He watched the woman he'd just called a fraud disappear into the hospital, surrounded by professionals who treated her like she belonged there, like she was their best chance. And somewhere, under the noise of his pride, something else stirred. A tiny, unwelcome sliver of fear that he might have been terribly, catastrophically wrong. Inside, Dr. Maya Ellison moved with the speed of experience, issuing orders, reading scans, preparing to open yet another skull, and convince death to wait. She had no idea that the man who'd spent the last 15 minutes tearing her down would, before the day was over, be lying on one of her own operating tables. And she definitely didn't know that it wouldn't be the first time she had held his life in her hands. But that part of the story belongs to another time. A rainy night 20 years earlier, when an 8-year-old boy was rushed into a different emergency room, and a young resident named Maya Ellison first learned what it meant to fight the clock for a child she'd never met. 20 years earlier, St. Augustine Medical Center didn't have the glossy new lobby or the updated trauma bay doors. The tiles were a little more yellowed, the monitors a little bulkier, and the coffee somehow even worse. But the energy, the low, humming urgency of a place that lived between life and death, felt exactly the same. It was a cold, rainy Thursday night in October when 8-year-old Benjamin Walker was carried through those doors. PED versus vehicle, ETA 2 minutes, the overhead speaker announced, crackling slightly. Child, unresponsive, possible head trauma. In the residence lounge, Dr. Maya Ellison, 28 years old and too tired to sit down because if she sat, she might never get back up, stood and grabbed her white coat. Her pager was already vibrating against her hip, flashing ER stat, neuro consult, PD, MVA. Her heart rate kicked up, but her hands were calm as she pushed open the swinging doors into the emergency department. The air smelled like antiseptic, wet pavement tracking in from outside, in fear. "Ellison, you're up," called Dr. Conrad Whitaker, the white-haired chief of neurosurgery from the nurses' station. "Kid's coming in with a suspected severe head injury. You'll be primary. I'll be supervising." Maya's eyebrows shot up. "Primary?" Whitaker's eyes crinkled. "You've got the hands for it. Time for everyone else to see what I already know." The ambulance doors burst open almost on cue. A small stretcher rolled in, dwarfed by the equipment around it. A boy's limp body lay strapped down, rainwater still dripping from his sneakers. Blood streaked his temple, matting light brown hair against too pale skin. "8-year-old male," the paramedic rattled off as they wheeled him into a trauma room. "Struck by an SUV while chasing a soccer ball into the street. Lost consciousness at the scene. Pupils asymmetric. GCS dropped from 12 to 7 en route. BP 90/60. Heart rate 132. The trauma team swarmed, monitors beeped, gloves snapped, voices overlapped. Maya's world narrowed. "Okay," she said, stepping to the head of the bed. "Everyone quiet for 10 seconds. Silence fell. Even the monitors seemed to soften. "I'm Dr. Ellison, neurosurgery," she said, voice firm. "This is Benjamin Walker. We are treating a probable traumatic brain injury. CT head stat. Get me baseline labs. Keep him oxygenated and keep his neck neutral. Let's move." They rolled him towards CT, plastic bumpers squeaking against the walls. Through the small window in the scanner suite, Maya watched the machine whir to life around the boy's motionless head. On the monitor, the cross-sectional images began appearing, grainy grayscale slices of fate. Maya leaned in, eyes scanning, tracking ventricles, midline, bone, blood. There it was, a bright, crescent-shaped collection pressing against the brain just above the left temple. Tissue shifted to the right, the kind of pressure that didn't ask permission. "Epidural hematoma," she said, more to herself than anyone. "Significant midline shift. He won't tolerate this for long." "Or?" asked the radiology tech. "Immediately," Maya replied. "Page anesthesia. Call the pediatric ICU. Tell them we're bringing him up." By the time they wheeled Ben back to the trauma bay, his parents were there. They stood in the hallway just outside the room, clothes soaked from the rain. His father, Harold, clutched a soccer ball streaked with mud, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His mother, Denise, stared through the glass window at her son, her lips moving silently, praying or pleading or both. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker?" Maya asked, stepping toward them, surgical cap hanging around her neck, coat already half-buttoned. Denise's eyes snapped to hers, red-rimmed and wild. Is he going to—" "I'm Dr. Ellison," Maya said gently. "I'm the neurosurgery resident on call. I've reviewed Benjamin's scans. He has bleeding inside his skull that's putting dangerous pressure on his brain. We need to operate right away to relieve that pressure and stop the bleeding." Harold swallowed hard, knuckles whitening around the ball. "How bad is it? Don't sugarcoat it." "It's serious," Maya said, meeting his gaze directly. "Without surgery, the pressure could cause permanent brain damage or—" She paused, choosing words that didn't rip them open more than necessary. "Or he might not survive. With surgery, children his age have a strong chance if we move quickly and carefully. I have trained for this moment for years. I will treat your son like he is my own family." Denise's shoulders shook. You look so young," she whispered, then immediately flushed in shame. "I'm sorry, Before Maya could answer, Dr. Whitaker stepped forward, having watched the conversation from a short distance. "Mrs. Walker," he said kindly, "I'm Conrad Whitaker, chief of neurosurgery here. I've been operating on brains longer than I care to admit, and if my own grandchild were on that table, I would ask Dr. Ellison to operate. Her hands are steady. Her judgment is sound. Your boy could not be in better care." Harold looked from Whitaker's lined, authoritative face to Maya's focused eyes. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the tile. "Can you save him?" he asked, voice cracking. "I can fight for him," Maya said. "We caught this early. That helps. But I need your permission to start." Denise stepped closer, grabbing Maya's hand with both of hers, surprising her. "Please," she whispered, "please bring my baby back to me." "I'll do everything in my power," Maya replied. Minutes later, in the bright chill of the operating room, the world transformed into clean lines and controlled sounds. The chaos of the ER dissolved. Here, every movement was choreographed, every word precise. "Patient, Benjamin Walker, 8 years old," Maya said as she scrubbed in. "Severe blunt head trauma with epidural hematoma over the left temporal region. We'll perform emergent craniotomy, evacuate the clot, and control the bleeding." Beside her, Nurse Yvonne Clark, younger then, hair jet black instead of salt and pepper, but with the same sharp, watchful eyes, helped her into her sterile gown. "You've got this, Dr. Ellison," Yvonne murmured. "You were born for this work." Maya stepped up to the table, looking down at the small head, partially shaved, skin prepped and draped. "Scalpel," she said. Time changed texture. It didn't speed up or slow down. It simply stopped existing outside the rectangle of the operative field. Skin parted under her blade. She worked methodically through scalp and soft tissue, revealing the curve of the skull beneath. The air smelled faintly metallic, antiseptic, and iron. "Drill," she requested. The high whine began, vibrating through her fingers as she created a careful window in bone. Whitaker watched from the head of the table, eyes attentive, but hands clasped behind his back. He intervened only once, to adjust the position of a retractor by a fraction of an inch. Otherwise, he was silent, giving her the room to prove herself. "Bone flap off," Maya said when the oval of skull came free. Underneath, dark blood bulged against the membrane that covered the brain. "There's your hematoma," Whitaker murmured. "Now the dance." Maya opened the dura with meticulous care. The pooled blood spilled, thick and dark, easing some of the pressure with every suction pass. The child's brain, once compressed, began to slowly re-expand to its natural contours. "Bleeding source at middle meningeal artery," she said, spotting the culprit vessel. "Clamping and cauterizing now." Her heart pounded, but her hands moved with the exactness she had drilled into them for years. No wasted motion, no hesitation. One slip could mean paralysis, seizures, a life forever altered. "ICP is coming down," the anesthesiologist reported, sounding relieved. "Heart rate stabilizing." Maya continued to work, speaking quietly to the boy, though he couldn't hear her. "Come on, Benjamin," she murmured. "You've got soccer games to play and birthday candles to blow out. You're not done yet. Fight with me." Nurse Clark glanced up at her, something like pride shining in her eyes. After what felt both like minutes and eternity, the monitor numbers settled into a calm rhythm. The brain, now freed from the crushing pressure, pulsed gently beneath her instruments. "Clot fully evacuated," Maya announced. "Bleeding controlled. Brain tissue looks viable." "Beautiful work, Dr. Ellison," Whitaker said softly. "Let's start closure." Layer by layer, she put the child back together. Bones secured, protective membrane closed, scalp repaired. When she finally stepped back, rolling her aching shoulders, it was nearing midnight. In the family room down the hall, Harold and Denise rose to their feet the moment she stepped in, mask dangling from one ear, cap still on, eyes rimmed red from strain. "The surgery was successful," Maya said simply. Denise's knees buckled, and Harold caught her, both of them dissolving into sobs of relief. "He's stable," Maya continued. "We relieved the pressure and controlled the bleeding. Barring complications, I expect him to make a full recovery. He's strong. His brain responded well. You'll see him in the morning, but he'll be sleepy and connected to a lot of equipment. That's all part of the healing." Harold put the soccer ball down at last. "How do we ever thank you?" he choked out. "You saved our boy. You saved our whole world." Maya shook her head. "You don't need to thank me. This is what I'm here for. The best way to thank me is to make sure he wears a helmet when he bikes and learns to look both ways twice." A small, watery laugh broke through Denise's tears. The next day, when Benjamin's eyes finally fluttered open in the pediatric ICU, Maya was there, checking his pupils, watching his responses. His gaze wandered around the room before landing on her. "Are you my doctor?" he whispered, voice hoarse. "Yes," Maya said, a smile softening her features behind the mask. I'm Dr. Ellison. I helped your brain after the accident. Did you make the hurt go away? He asked. I did my best, she said. How does your head feel? Funny, he admitted, but better. You did a brave thing, Benjamin, she told him. You fought hard. He gave her a tiny thumbs up, the bandage around his head making him look like a cartoon soldier. Thank you, he said simply. For years afterward, Maya would occasionally think about that little boy in passing, when she saw a soccer ball left in a hallway, or when a new resident struggled through their first pediatric case. She had no way of knowing that the child whose life she fought for on that rainy October night would grow up to wear a paramedic uniform, or that one day in the same hospital, he'd look her in the eye and call her a fraud. That knowledge was waiting in the future, like a loaded question, and the first part of the answer was about to crash back into the present. Back in the present, the hum of the hospital swallowed the earlier confrontation in the bay, at least on the surface. Inside people's heads, the words lingered. Whale, impostor, quota filler. In Trauma Room 3, none of that mattered. Monitors beeped in urgent symphony as Dr. Maya Ellison stood over the 34-year-old motorcycle accident victim Ben Walker had brought in. Left temporal skull fracture, epidural hematoma, GCS 8 on arrival, she recited, eyes glued to the CT scans displayed on the screen. Or 2 is ready. We'll go straight up after we stabilize his airway. The team moved around her like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Anesthesiology prepped intubation. Nurses placed lines. A respiratory therapist adjusted oxygen settings. At the periphery, Dr. Marcus Hale watched Maya work. The tight, efficient economy of her movements. The way she seemed to see 3 steps ahead of everyone else. There was no trace now of the woman who'd stood in the ambulance bay, being mocked for her existence. There was only the surgeon. Let's roll, she said at last. We're losing time. They raced toward the OR, wheels squeaking over thresholds, elevator doors barely opening fast enough. As they disappeared, the emergency department slowly reverted to its baseline rhythm. Out in the ambulance bay, the afternoon had dimmed, clouds gathering thick and heavy. The earlier crowd was gone now, scattered back to their posts. Only 2 figures remained by the rig. Leo Cruz leaned against the bumper, arms folded, head bowed. He looked as if he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Beside him, Ben Walker yanked equipment from the back of the truck with jerky, angry movements, the adrenaline from the argument still burning in his veins. I can't believe this place, Ben muttered, tossing used packaging into a red biohazard bag. Everyone's so desperate to be politically correct, they'll let anyone in a white coat pretend to be a doctor. Leo stared at him. Ben, you need to stop. Stop what? Saying what everyone else is thinking? Ben shot back. You saw her. You know what real neurosurgeons look like. They're sharp, fit, sharp jawlines, iron discipline. They don't look like they're one shift away from a heart attack. You know what I saw? Leo said quietly. I saw a woman walk straight through your abuse to get to a patient. I saw a chief of emergency medicine and a head nurse both stand between you and her like a shield, because they know her work. I saw someone you called incompetent literally take over when your job was done. She didn't look like your idea of a doctor, Leo snapped, voice rising for the first time. That's the point, Ben. That's the whole problem. Ben snorted. It's not about race, you know, or gender. Everyone keeps trying to make it about that. It's about competence, about standards. You think I care what color my surgeon is? I care that my surgeon doesn't look like they treat self-control as optional. Leo stared at him for a long beat. You really don't hear yourself, do you? Ben turned back to the rig, reaching for the heavy cardiac monitor that had shifted during their high-speed transport. It sat half off its bracket, locked in place by a single loose clamp that should have been replaced months ago. Careful, Leo warned. That thing's barely secured. I've got it, Ben said impatiently, shoving his hands under the unit to drag it forward. He was still half turned toward Leo, mid-rant. Look, all I'm saying is if I'm the one bleeding on a table, I don't want a surgeon who treats their own body like a buff. The sentence never finished. The loose clamp gave way with a hard metallic snap. The 35-pound monitor lurched forward, the corner of its metal housing whipping outward like a swinging hammer. It struck Ben squarely in the left temple with a sickening crack. For a split second, the world froze. Then everything hit at once. Ben's eyes went wide, pupils dilating. Blood immediately streamed down the side of his face, soaking his collar. The concrete beneath his boots tilted. "Ben!" Leo lunged, but gravity was faster. Ben's knees buckled, body folding. Leo barely managed to catch his partner's shoulders and guide him down, instead of letting him slam headfirst into the bay floor. "Ben, can you hear me?" Leo demanded, hands already moving in practiced assessment. "Look at me. Stay with me." Ben's mouth worked, forming fractured sounds that never quite became words. His right hand twitched. His left arm stayed limp. When Leo flashed a penlight across his eyes, his heart sank. The pupils weren't matching. One was sluggish. The other barely reacted at all. "Damn it," Leo hissed. He grabbed his radio with shaking fingers. "Dispatch, Unit 7 at St. Augustine Ambulance Bay. We have a new emergency. Medic down. Repeat, medic down. Blunt head trauma. Probable intracranial bleed. Request immediate trauma team to bay." This is not a drill. Inside, Dr. Hale was halfway through dictating notes when the overhead alert chimed again. "Trauma stat, ambulance bay. Staff member injured, head trauma. Repeat, trauma stat, ambulance bay." He looked up sharply. Nurse Yvonne Clark's eyes met his over the nurse's station. For a moment, neither of them said what they were thinking. Of all the people. "Get a team," Dr. Hale ordered. "Gurney, trauma kit, the works. Move." They burst through the glass doors into the bay minutes later. Rain had finally started to fall, light and cold, mixing with the spreading pool of blood on the concrete. Leo was on his knees, holding Ben's head steady, his uniform smeared red. He was lifting the monitor, Leo said, voice tight. Bracket failed. It fell straight into his temple. He was alert for maybe 10 seconds, then started slurring. GCS dropped fast. Pupils are now unequal. Respirations shallow. "Okay, good job," Dr. Hale said, already palpating the injury, assessing vitals. "Let's transfer him. On 3, 1, 2, 3. They lifted Ben onto the gurney. His head lolled slightly before Nurse Clark corrected the angle, hands gentle but firm. When the trauma doors swung open this time, there was no argument about who was allowed through. CT confirmed what everyone already suspected, a fresh epidural hematoma over the left temporal region, nearly identical in location and shape to the bleed Maya had just treated in the motorcycle victim. Dr. Hale stared at the images, then at the name at the top of the screen. "Walker, Benjamin. He's going to need a craniotomy," he said quietly. "We need neurosurgery, again." "Dr. Morrison is still scrubbed in with that tumor resection," the charge nurse said, scanning the on-call list. "The only neurosurgeon available right now is—" She stopped, eyes widening slightly. Dr. Hale didn't need her to finish the sentence. "Page Dr. Ellison," he said. "Tell her we have another head trauma, critical, and tell her it's Ben Walker." In OR 2, Maya was just starting the closure on the earlier trauma case when the intercom crackled. "Dr. Ellison, sorry to interrupt," came the OR coordinator's voice. "Another emergent head trauma has arrived. Staff member. Paramedic. Blunt force to left temple. CT shows a large epidural. You're the only neurosurgeon free within the window." Maya's hands didn't stop moving. "How long can the new patient safely wait?" 10, maybe 15 minutes before we're pushing it," the voice replied. "Dr. Morrison is tied up for at least an hour. Dr. Klein is out of town." Maya glanced at the anesthesiologist. "We'll finish this closure as efficiently as possible. Tell them to stabilize, prep labs, and have CT images ready. I'll review them as soon as I'm out." She didn't ask the patient's name. There wasn't time, and names never changed the work. 25 minutes later, she stripped off her bloody gown, washed off, and stood in front of a new set of scans. Her own reflection hovered over the grayscale images, superimposed over a familiar pattern of bleeding. Left temporal region, crescent of hyperdensity, midline shift pressing the brain to the right. The kind of bleed that could turn a person into a stranger in their own body if it wasn't relieved. "Patient?" she asked quietly. "Walker," the radiology tech said. "Ben, one of the paramedics." The air in Maya's lungs turned to glass for a heartbeat. Ben Walker. She could see him again in her mind's eye. Face red, voice dripping contempt as he called her a whale in front of her colleagues, his refusal to move, his insistence she wasn't a real doctor. For a fraction of a second, a single treacherous heartbeat, she felt something dark tug at her. Then it passed. "Get him to OR3 now," she said. "We don't have time to waste." As they wheeled Ben in, already intubated, head immobilized, Maya stepped up to the table. The bandage over his temple was soaked through. Blood had dried in jagged rivers down his cheek, now partly cleaned. His face, slack under anesthesia, looked younger than it had in the bay. Less mean, more human. "ICP is elevated," the anesthesiologist reported. "We're riding a fine line here." Maya studied him for a moment longer. Then she spoke softly, just loud enough for the team around the table to hear. "This is Mr. Ben Walker," she said. "He has a large epidural hematoma over the left temporal region. We're going to do what we always do. We're going to give him a chance to wake up." She didn't say, even if he doesn't deserve it, because that wasn't her job to decide. "Scalpel," she said, and for the second time in his life, though he didn't know it yet, a black woman he thought didn't belong in an operating room opened his skull to pull him back from the edge. Outside, in a quiet corner of radiology, a clerk updating electronic records frowned at her screen. "Hey," she called to her supervisor, "the system's flagging a possible duplicate chart for this Walker guy. Same name, same birthday, same social, another neurosurgery, from 20 years ago." Her supervisor barely glanced up. "We'll sort it later. For now, make sure the current file is clean. The docs will want everything in one place." Later would turn out to be important. But in this moment, all that mattered was the ticking clock and the woman determined to outrun it. The surgery on Ben Walker was brutal, delicate, and unrelenting. Under the unforgiving glare of the OR lights, Dr. Maya Ellison worked in silence, brow furrowed in concentration. Every movement counted. Every second mattered. Again the bone window. Again the dark flood of clotted blood pushing brain where it didn't belong. Again the hunt for the torn vessel. "Clot evacuated," she said finally, suction drawing the last dark streaks away. "Brain surface decompressing, midline shift improving. ICP returning to normal range," the anesthesiologist confirmed. "Vitals stabilizing." Maya stitched the vessel with sutures, finer than a strand of hair, fingers moving with a precision that had nothing to prove to anyone, except the silent, unconscious man on the table, and the part of herself that still remembered his words. "You don't look like a doctor. You're a fraud. Real surgeons don't look like you." When the final layer of scalp was closed and the dressings were in place, it was close to 3 in the morning. She felt wrung out, like someone had turned her inside out and left her to dry. "Good work," came Dr. Hale's voice from the observation window. "Textbook, even under pressure." Maya peeled off her gloves, flexing stiff fingers. "Transfer him to neuro ICU," she said. "I want hourly neuro checks. Page me at any change." By the time she sat down in the ICU family room with a paper cup of coffee she didn't particularly want, the hospital was in that strange pre-dawn lull where even emergencies seemed to whisper instead of shout. Someone cleared his throat gently. "Dr. Ellison?" She looked up to see Andre Fields, the hospital's director of medical records and compliance, holding a tablet. Tall, bespectacled, the type of man who looked more comfortable with data than with blood. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I know it's been a long night, but something came up with your patient, Ben Walker." Her spine straightened. "Is there a problem?" "Not with the care," Andre said quickly. "Everything there is pristine, as always. It's the chart. Our system flagged a potential duplicate from an old archive server. Same name, same date of birth, same social. Pediatric neurosurgery case 20 years ago. Different MRN because we were on a different system back then." He handed her the tablet. On the screen, patient, Walker Benjamin. Age 8, date October 12th, 20 years ago. Attending, surgeon, Ellison, M. Neurosurgery, resident. For a second, the room spun. She tapped open the surgical note. Her own words appeared, younger handwriting rendered in crisp digital text. Emergent left temporal craniotomy for evacuation of epidural hematoma. Mechanism, motor vehicle versus pedestrian, child struck while chasing soccer ball. The memories she'd occasionally revisited over the years rushed back with unnerving clarity. The soaked soccer ball, the desperate parents, the small hand giving her a tiny thumbs up the morning after surgery. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You remember him?" Andre asked. "I remember the case," she said slowly. "I never connected the name. I mean, Walker is common enough, but the same birth date, the same injury location?" Her gaze moved from the tablet screen to the closed ICU door a few meters away, behind which Ben lay sedated, his newly operated skull wrapped in fresh bandages. "Does he know?" she asked. Andre shook his head. "I doubt it. He was 8, and his parents never mentioned the details when they signed the consent for tonight. They were too distraught. We haven't told them yet." She exhaled slowly. "Let's keep it that way for now," she said. "At least until he's awake and stable. He deserves to hear it when his brain isn't drowning in anesthesia." Andre nodded and left her with the tablet. Maya stared at the picture attached to the old file. A young boy in a hospital bed, hair shaved on one side, eyes still sleepy but alive. Beside him stood a younger version of herself, leaner, with fewer lines around her eyes, wearing fierce determination like armor. "You again," she murmured, looking toward the ICU. "You really don't remember me at all." By late morning, Ben began to stir. He woke slowly, surfacing through layers of fog, head heavy, mouth dry. Voices drifted in and out, monitors beeping, someone adjusting tubing, a nurse murmuring. His first clear sensation was pain, dull and deep, pulsing behind his left eye. His second was confusion. "Mr. Walker," a voice said gently. "Ben, can you hear me?" He blinked, vision swimming into focus. White ceiling, soft light, a monitor screen to his right, an IV in his hand. And on the left, sitting calmly in a chair beside his bed, a face he recognized. The woman from the ambulance bay, the whale he'd called an impostor, the one everyone had insisted was a neurosurgeon. His chest tightened. "You," he rasped, voice ragged. "Yes," she said evenly. "I'm Dr. Ellison. How are you feeling?" He stared at her, horror and disbelief warring on his face. "Where's my surgeon?" he croaked. The, the real neurosurgeon, the guy they brought in after, "You're looking at your neurosurgeon," Maya said matter-of-factly. "You suffered an epidural hematoma. I operated on you last night. We removed the clot and repaired the damaged vessel. The surgery went well. You're stable. If your recovery continues like this, you should regain full function." Ben laughed, a short, ugly sound that turned into a wince as the movement tugged on his incision. "No," he said. "No, you're messing with me. Someone else did the surgery. Morrison. Hale. I don't know. Someone. Not you." "Mr. Walker." "It's Ben," he snapped automatically, then grimaced as pain stabbed his temple. "And I'm not stupid. Yesterday I called you out for pretending to be a doctor. You think I'm going to believe they let you open my skull?" Before Maya could respond, Leo stepped into the room, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Hey," Leo said quietly. "You're awake." Ben turned on him, relieved. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them this is some kind of joke. She didn't operate on me, right? They brought in someone else." Leo's jaw clenched. "Ben," he said, "I watched them wheel you into OR 3. Dr. Ellison went in after you. Dr. Hale observed the whole case. She's the one who saved your life." Ben stared, blood draining from his face. "That's not possible," he whispered. She can't be." "She is," came a third voice from the doorway. Dr. Hale stepped inside, holding a tablet. "Mr. Walker," he said formally, "I observed your surgery. Dr. Ellison performed a beautiful craniotomy under pressure. She evacuated your hematoma, controlled the bleed, and stabilized your brain. Without her, you would almost certainly be dead." He tapped the screen and turned it so Ben could see. Still images from the recording of the surgery showed Maya in full gear, hands inside the open skull. "This is her making the initial incision," Hale said. "Swipe. This is her evacuating the clot. Swipe. This is her repairing the vessel." Ben stared at the images like they were photos of a stranger's life. His throat worked. "I called you a fraud," he said to Maya, voice breaking. "I said you weren't a real doctor. I tried to stop you from touching my patient, and I did my job, she said quietly. Twice. He frowned, disoriented. Twice? What do you mean twice? Maya exchanged a look with Dr. Hale. He gave a tiny nod. We would have waited until later, she said, but the chart we pulled last night changed that plan. There's something you need to see. She took the tablet from Hale, navigated to the archived record, and handed it to Ben. Scroll, she said. Ben squinted at the text, eyes still struggling to adjust. He saw his own name, his birth date, a date 20 years earlier, then words that made the room suddenly feel smaller. Age, 8. Mechanism, motor vehicle versus pedestrian. Severe traumatic brain injury. Epidural hematoma. His hand trembled. I remember being in a hospital when I was a kid, he said slowly. My parents told me it was a bad accident, but they never gave details. They said the doctors fixed my head and that was that. Look at the surgeon's name, Maya said softly. He scrolled. Attending surgeon, Ellison, M. Neurosurgery resident. His eyes shot up to her face. You, he breathed. Yes, she said. The first major pediatric brain surgery I ever led was on an 8-year-old boy who chased his soccer ball into the street and got hit by a car. His name was Benjamin Walker. A memory resurfaced, fuzzy, fragmented, like a dream. The sensation of waking up with his head heavy, his mother crying and laughing at the same time. A young black woman with kind eyes shining behind a surgical mask, telling him he was brave. Are you my doctor? He had asked her. Yes, I helped your brain after the accident. He had forgotten her face. His parents had tried to shield him from the trauma. Time had blurred the details, but now staring at the evidence in his hand and the woman beside his bed, the puzzle pieces clicked into place with cruel clarity. You saved my life when I was 8, he whispered. And then 20 years later, I stood outside this hospital and called you a whale, told you that you weren't a real doctor, tried to stop you from helping someone else. His eyes filled, tears sliding, hot and unimpeded down his temples into his pillow. And when a monitor crushed my skull, he continued, voice shaking, they called you again. And you came. Maya's voice was very calm. There was a brain bleeding into a space that couldn't expand, she said. There was a life on the line. That's all I needed to know. I don't deserve that, he choked out. I don't deserve you saving me once, let alone twice. After what I said, that's not how medicine works, she interrupted gently. I don't get to pick who deserves to live based on how they treat me. I take an oath to fight for life when I can. Sometimes that means saving people who would cross the street to avoid me, or people who would call me names outside the OR and need my hands inside it an hour later. Ben covered his face with his uninjured hand, as if he could hide from the reality he'd created. I thought I was just telling the truth, he said, voice muffled. I thought I was calling out lowered standards, speaking up about what no one else would say. That's how prejudice often dresses itself, Dr. Hale said quietly from the foot of the bed. As courage, as realism, as high standards. It convinces you you're the only one brave enough to see what's really going on, when in fact you're just blind to your own biases. I didn't think I was racist, Ben said weakly. I still don't. I mean, do I? Ben, Leo said, stepping closer. You called a black female neurosurgeon a fraud because she doesn't fit the image you grew up with. You refused to accept her credentials even when you were staring at her badge. You called me a diversity hire for defending her. You may not think of yourself as a racist, but what you said and did, that was racism and cruelty and ignorance. Ben flinched at each word like it was another blow to his skull. I almost killed a patient, he whispered. If she'd listened to me, if she'd stepped aside. But she didn't, Maya said. And the man you brought in is recovering. We were lucky. You were lucky. Twice. He lowered his hand, eyes red, face raw and unguarded for the first time since she'd met him. What do I do with that? He asked hoarsely. How do I live with myself after this? That, Maya said, isn't a question you can answer in a single hospital stay. It's work, long work, hard work. Can I at least ask you something now? He said. She nodded. Why didn't you tear into me yesterday? He asked. You could have shredded me in front of everyone, listed your degrees, your surgeries, your publications. You could have humiliated me. Instead, you just kept trying to get to the patient. Because that's what mattered in that moment, she replied. Every minute we argued was damage to a stranger's brain. You attacking me wasn't new. Different face, same assumptions. I've had residents talk down to me. Patients ask for a real doctor when I walk in. If I stopped to fight every battle, I'd never save anybody. So you just, he shook his head in disbelief. You just absorbed all that hate. I don't absorb it, she said quietly. I carry it. I put it somewhere it won't hurt my patients. And when I have the energy, I unpack it and use it to teach. But I don't always get that luxury in the middle of a crisis. He let out a long, shuddering breath. I want to change, he said. I don't even know where to start. Up here, he tapped the good side of his head. I know you saved me. Twice. I know what I said was wrong, but there's a part of me that still instinctively looks at you and thinks, that can't be the neurosurgeon. And that terrifies me. Fear can be useful, Maya said, as long as it pushes you toward work, not denial. There are therapists who specialize in implicit bias, programs that walk you through dismantling this stuff. But none of it will matter if you're just trying to get rid of guilt. You have to want to be different, not just feel better. I do, he said instantly. After this, I have to. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face as if looking for a hemorrhage she couldn't see on CT. I'll check on you again later, she said at last, standing. Focus on healing. Physical first, then the rest. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Ben? He looked up, startled. You said yesterday that real neurosurgeons have discipline, she said, that they control themselves, that they don't fall apart under pressure. I want you to remember that the next time you picture me in an OR. When she left, the room felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Ben stared at the tablet still resting beside him, at the photo of himself as a child next to a younger Dr. Ellison, both of them smiling, one grateful for being alive, the other grateful for being able to give that gift. He realized then that the woman he tried to strip of her dignity in a parking lot had quietly safeguarded his entire existence. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't know who he was anymore. 6 weeks later, the scar on Ben Walker's head had faded from angry red to pale pink. The swelling was gone. His neurologic exam was essentially normal. From the outside, he looked like a man who just had a close call and walked away. Inside, he felt like a building that had been gutted by fire and was now being rebuilt from the foundation up. He resigned from the ambulance service 2 weeks after discharge. His supervisor had tried to talk him out of it. You're one of our best on scene, she argued. You made a mistake. Get some training. Do the sensitivity seminars. Don't throw your whole career away. This isn't about punishment, Ben said quietly. I can't trust myself in this job until I've torn down the part of me that almost cost a life in that bay. People in crisis deserve better than someone who doesn't even know what's rotting inside his own head. Now he stood in a hospital conference room that still smelled faintly of dry erase markers and coffee, looking out at a semicircle of faces. Dr. Hale, Nurse Yvonne Clark, Dr. Miguel Rosas, the emergency resident he'd called a diversity hire that day, Leo Cruz, a few techs, and a handful of nurses who'd been there in the ambulance bay. At the end of the table sat Dr. Maya Ellison, no scrubs today. She wore a simple navy blouse under a gray blazer, her hair pulled back. Without the OR cap and mask, it was easier to see the quiet weariness in her eyes and the unshakable steadiness beneath it. Thanks for coming, Ben began, hands clasped to hide their tremor. I asked Dr. Hale if I could speak to all of you together. You deserve to hear this from me, not through rumors. No one made it easy for him. No sympathetic nods, no soft smiles, just expectant, guarded attention. 6 weeks ago, he said, I walked into your hospital and did something I've spent every day since then trying to understand. I looked at a black woman in scrubs with a badge that said attending neurosurgeon, and I decided, based solely on her body and her skin, that she couldn't possibly be what her credentials said she was. I called her a whale, a fraud. I tried to block her from reaching a patient she'd later save. He swallowed. I thought I was defending standards, he went on. I thought I was protecting my patient. I told myself I was being brave enough to say what others were too afraid to say. What I was really doing was pouring every unexamined bias I've absorbed my entire life onto someone who'd done nothing but answer an emergency page. Dr. Rosas leaned back, arms crossed. You also called me a diversity hire, he said. You assumed I got through Harvard Med and residency because someone wanted brown faces in a brochure. I did, Ben said, meeting his gaze. And that was racist. Full stop. I can try to dress it up with my intentions or my stress level or whatever else. But at the end of the day, I used your ethnicity to question your merit. Same with Dr. Ellison. Same with anyone who doesn't look like the doctor in my head. Silence. No one rushed in to make him feel better. In the 6 weeks since, he continued, I've started intensive therapy with a psychologist who specializes in bias and cognitive distortions. I've completed 40 hours of coursework on structural racism, implicit bias, and equity in healthcare. I'm enrolled in a year-long program that combines education with community work. I'm not saying that to collect gold stars. I'm telling you because you have a right to know that I'm not just saying sorry and going back to business as usual. What about your career? One of the nurses asked. Still working as a medic? I resigned, Ben said. I don't think I can safely be the person making field decisions while my brain is still this tangled. I'm starting a social work program next semester. Long term, I want to work with people who are trying to unlearn the same kinds of poisonous thinking I carried for decades without even seeing it. Yvonne raised an eyebrow. So you're flipping sides? I'm trying to, he said, but I know how this can sound, like I'm reinventing myself without paying the price. That's why I asked for this meeting. You don't owe me forgiveness or trust or even the benefit of the doubt, but I owe you honesty and accountability. He turned to Leo. And you, he said, voice dipping, you put your reputation on the line that day. You stood beside me for 8 years and didn't know this part of me existed. I'm sorry for forcing you into that, for making you question yourself because you didn't call me out sooner. Leo shook his head slowly. I should have, he said. Over the years, you made comments that bothered me. Little things. Those neighborhoods. Those people. I told myself you were just venting, that you were a good medic and that was what counted. I let it slide until it almost killed someone. That's on me, not you, Ben said. You didn't put those thoughts in my head, but I'm grateful you're willing to say it out loud, because that's another part I'm learning about, how silence lets this stuff grow. Dr. Rosa cleared his throat. So what exactly are you asking from us? He said. Because I'll be honest, man, I don't feel particularly moved to hug it out. I'm not asking for a hug, Ben replied. I'm asking for 3 things. 1, the chance to say this to your faces instead of pretending it didn't happen. 2, permission to use my story publicly as a cautionary tale. I'm already speaking at EMT and nursing schools about implicit bias and what it looks like when you don't check it. I want to name this hospital this day and my own behavior honestly, if you're okay with that. And 3, he hesitated, then looked at Maya. I'm asking for the chance, over time, to become someone you trust not with your lives, but with your message. Someone who can stand in rooms full of people who look like me and say, this is what it looks like when you let prejudice call itself professionalism. All eyes went to Maya. She hadn't spoken once during the meeting. She sat with her hands loosely folded, expression unreadable. What do you think, Dr. Ellison? Dr. Hale asked finally. You've carried the brunt of this more than any of us. She took a breath. What Ben did in that ambulance bay, she said, hurt. Not just because of the words. I've heard nasty words before. It hurt because he tried to weaponize his role, to turn his proximity to a patient into authority over who counted as a real doctor. That was dangerous, and yes, it was racist and fatphobic, and disrespectful to everyone here. Ben bowed his head. But, she continued, I have sat with him in a therapy room while he unpacked where that came from. I've watched him read, listen, and sit with the discomfort instead of deflecting it. I've seen him cry, not because he was caught, but because he truly began to see the people he'd been stepping on without noticing. I've seen him visit patients he once dismissed and apologize without cameras in the room. She looked around the table. I'm not asking you to forgive him today, she said. That's between each of you and your conscience. But I am asking you to believe that people can change. If I didn't believe that, I'd stop operating. Because what's the point of pulling someone back from the edge if you don't think they can ever be better than they were the day they almost died? Dr. Rosas let out a slow breath. I'm not ready to grab a coffee with him, he said. But if you're that convinced he's doing the work, I won't stand in the way of him telling the story. Maybe some other medic will hear it and pull back before they say what he said. Yvonne nodded grudgingly. I'm old enough to know people are more than their worst day, she said. I won't forget what you did, Ben, but I'll watch what you do next. One by one, people offered versions of the same thing. Not absolution, but a narrow bridge, extended just far enough for him to begin crossing, if he did the walking. After the room emptied, Ben lingered with Maya. I meant what I said about using this publicly, he told her. If you'd rather your name stay out of it, I'll keep it anonymous. No, she said. Use my name. Use the truth. I'm not ashamed of being the surgeon you tried to erase. If your story helps one person check their snap judgment in a trauma bay, it's worth the discomfort. He swallowed. There's one more thing I decided, he added. Every year on the date of both surgeries, when you saved me as a kid and when you save me again, I'm donating my time and money to organizations that support Black women in medicine. Scholarships, mentorship programs, whatever moves the needle a centimeter. She tilted her head slightly. Symbolic gestures can be hollow, she said, or they can be anchors that keep you from drifting back to who you were. Make sure this one's the second kind. I will, he said. Months passed. Ben kept his promises. Therapy twice a week, classes on weekends, volunteer shifts with a community group that worked with kids from neighborhoods like the ones he used to side-eye in silence. He started speaking at EMS orientations. He didn't present himself as a hero who had changed. He presented himself as a warning. I called a Black brain surgeon a fraud in front of her own hospital, he told them. I thought I was protecting my patient. What I was really protecting was an image in my head of who's allowed to be excellent. He showed them a photo of himself at 8 years old next to a much younger Dr. Ellison. This woman saved my life as a child, he said. 20 years later, she saved it again after I insulted her, tried to block her, and told everyone she wasn't a real doctor. If she can see value in my life after that, the least I can do is spend whatever time I have left making sure fewer people become the man I was in that bay. In quiet moments, he still had flashes, walking past a heavy-set doctor in the hallway and feeling the old snap judgment flare up. But now, instead of trusting it, he stopped, examined it, and asked himself, where did that come from? Who taught me that shape equals skill? Do I want to keep believing that? Each time he chose differently, the old wiring frayed a little more. As for Dr. Maya Ellison, she went back to her operating rooms, her research, her residence. She still encountered prejudice, polite versions and ugly versions, but she no longer saw her career as only surgeries and scans. She saw it as a series of circles closing. A little boy saved from a car accident grew up to nearly block another man's chance at survival, and then became someone who used his shame as fuel for change. A medic who mocked a Black, plus-size surgeon became one of her most persistent advocates, repeating her name in rooms she'd never enter, insisting people learn what a real neurosurgeon actually looks like. And somewhere between bone flaps and bias training, between operating rooms and awkward apology meetings, Maya realized something profound. Healing brains was one kind of medicine. Helping someone heal the part of them that had learned to dehumanize others, that was another. Different tools, same intention. If you've stayed with this story all the way to this point, you already know something that Ben learned the hard way and Maya had known for years. Real excellence doesn't always look like the picture in your head. Real professionalism isn't measured by a waistline or a jawline. And real strength is sometimes the quiet, stubborn choice to save the life of the person who tried to take your dignity. If you believe people can change, really change, when they confront their worst selves, then this is the kind of story we'll keep telling. Stories where prejudice gets called out, not glorified. Where justice doesn't always mean punishment, but transformation. If that resonates with you, you know what to do. Share this with someone who still thinks they can see competence at a glance. Leave a comment about a time you misjudged someone or were misjudged and what you learned. And when you meet your next Dr. Ellison in the real world, look twice. She might be the one holding your life in her hands.